Good evening. Happy Independence Day. As Trinidad and Tobago marks its 63rd anniversary of independence, it offers us an opportunity to reflect on not just how far we have come as a nation, but also the men and women who have shaped the landscape in which we live. I'm honored tonight to be joined by a man whose life spans the Olympic lanes, a man who has also been in the halls of Parliament and also the boardrooms of finance. From silver medal at the Olympic Games to service to our nation, he represents the best of what this country has to offer. My guest this evening is Wendell Mottley. Mr. Wendell Mottley, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you, Ryan.
You were 21 years old when Trinidad and Tobago became an independent nation. What do you remember of the TNT then?
I remember it crystal clear, even though it's been that many years. You have to first remember that we were in colonial times up till then. And at QRC, we would celebrate the empire. And quite apart from singing God Save the Queen, we would sing Land of Hope and Glory, all celebrating the Brits and the British Empire. So this was an entirely new dispensation. We worked up to it. There were all the political speeches, and then came the day itself, Independence Day. And to see that flag go up outside of the Red House, oh, it was just really exciting times. And what made it very special for me as well, I had my American roommate from Yale come down, and it was over the August vacation, spend time with me. So he witnessed this historic event with me. But
what did he make of it?
I remember it just as if it was yesterday.
What did he make of it as an American here for what is Trinidad and Tobago's most major moment as a country?
Well, he was curious because, of course, Americans had had their independence, but quite some time ago. So he was curious, and he got caught up in all of the excitement and so forth, and was able, when we went back to college later that fall, to relay that excitement to some of my friends and, of course, to our Yale trackmate friends.
You grew up...
And today we remain fast friends. And he would smile as we recall some of these events.
You grew up at a very interesting time in Trinidad and Tobago history, not least because you were 21 years old. That's an age that allows you to see the world and the country differently. A young adult, what was growing up in that independent era of TNT like?
Well, first of all, I went back to Yale, so I was a little bit distant from it. But I went back with the infection and the excitement and felt that I had to train to become part of this new Trinidad and Tobago, as so many hundreds of other Trinidadians in all different fields, engineering, economics, accounting. We felt that the world was just before us to make things happen. And we were in the position of preparing to make the best of an independent Trinidad and Tobago.
It's really interesting the way you say that. You had to train to be part of this Trinidad and Tobago, this independent Trinidad and Tobago. It reveals a sense of newness to the country, although the country very much existed before 1962. It represents this new thinking, a sort of newness to this country from August 31st, 1962 onward?
It very much did, because the country, of course, was always in the throes of change. But so there was still all of the sugar estates, still very much part of the past, the old refinery at Point of Pear. Cocoa was still flourishing on the estates. I still remember very, very clearly the heart of Trinidad's industry outside of oil and so forth in the south was located just outside of Port of Spain. We would see truckloads of citrus coming in to the Citrus Growers Association to be processed, to made into the world famous Trinidad Cooperative Citrus Growers orange and grapefruit juice that we exported all over Europe and especially to the UK. The Center of Engineering was East End Foundry that was run by Neil and Massey. There was Lever Brothers, there was West Indian Tobacco. All of that, even then, we Carib Brewery outside of Port of Spain. So that was a center of industrial activity outside of the oil fields in Trinidad and Tobago. And it's an important reminder to those of you who know now how that center of gravity has shifted. It was also, Ryan, the center of our port life. Literally thousands of workers went to work every day on the Port of Spain. So Port of Spain was alive. We shopped in Port of Spain. We shopped on Frederick Street. And all of this, of course, has been deindustrialized. The port became a victim of containerization. So all of those thousands of workers shrank to nearly just a couple hundred. And of course, shopping has migrated out of downtown Port of Spain to scores of malls all over the country, not just in West Moorings, but Hoover, Shagona, San Fernando, and so forth. So things changed quite radically.
You were an athlete in Trinidad and Tobago. You were a politician. You were an economist. How did an independent nation shape the individual you are?
Well, I am always and have always been and will always remain Trini to the bone. So I wanted, even when I left Trinidad and Tobago and went up to Yale, I wanted to refine my athletics and I wanted to run for Trinidad and Tobago. I knew about McDonald, Bailey, and all of the Trinidad greats, but McDonald ran for Britain. I wanted to run for Trinidad and Tobago. And I trained towards that and had many opportunities to run for the US. My coach at Yale ultimately became the head US track coach. And I had many opportunities and temptations, but I've never regretted it. I've never regretted it. And in fact, just to tell a story, Brian, when we went to the Olympics in Tokyo, and I was running for the Trinidad team, Bob Giggengack, my Yale coach, had then become head United States coach. And he looked at me and he said, Wendell, I taught you everything, but now it's my job as head United States track coach with you running for Trinidad to cut your tail. And that's how it was.
From your perspective, Mr. Mottley, what were some of the early successes in the early decades of our independence?
Ryan, 1973 was a seminal year in our independence, almost a decade after we actually became independent. Just prior to 1973, we went through the trauma of the 1970 riots, where Port of Spain virtually got burnt out, with Black Power rioting and so forth. And the Prime Minister, Eric Williams, was very scared by those events. And at the same time, in 1973, there was the Arab-Israeli War, which had the effect of tremendously boosting oil and gas prices. And it gave a great boon to the Trinidad and Tobago treasury. And two things happened as a result of those events, Brian. The first was Williams talked about making cane stalks into steel, and that was a symbol for the transformation of Point Lisas. To make Point Lisas the driver of our engine of growth, to migrate away from being a primary oil producer to a gas producer, but we didn't have any markets for gas. We had to take that gas and transform it into petrochemicals so that we could export it to world markets. And that was one hell of an accomplishment. We need to understand the scale of that accomplishment and celebrate it. Williams gave Ken Julian the keys, so to speak, to the treasury and to the intellectual establishment in Trinidad to make this project happen. And it didn't happen overnight. It happened over many, many years and decades, and it went through several iterations. And I don't think Trinidad and Tobago celebrates this achievement, a world-scale achievement, sufficiently. We should be teaching this story, this accomplishment in high schools. Ken Julian should be a revered figure. It's not just Ken Julian, it's the enabling environment, the support that came from TNTech, the construction of the National Energy Corporation and the NGC, laying pipelines, building plants, and then making the change to private sector, international private sector involvement in all of that drives our nation today and makes central Trinidad, Hoover and Chaguanas, the new commercial and energy center of the country. That was tremendous, tremendous achievement at the time. But it occurred at the same time as decisions made from concerns and fright as to what happened in 1970 into becoming a rentier economy and taking those huge rents that we got from these huge oil prices and putting it into make work schemes to support or have poverty alleviation. And that, I think, RAN was a mistake. It was a mistake because it comes out of our history as coming out of slavery. We had to show resistance by doing as little work as possible. That's how we showed resistance. And we prayed for hurricanes and pestilence to lick up the master's whole economic environment. And then even after emancipation, we still had the colonial regime. So we felt as a people distant from that regime and we weren't part of it. And therefore, withholding labor and so forth was part of it. I mean, Earl Lovelace puts it beautifully in that book, The Dragon Can't Dance, where he talks about Aldrich, who, coming out of that tradition, which was valiant, it showed resistance, but it celebrated what Lovelace calls the trinity of idleness, laziness, and waste. So I put that particularly 1973 moment as a teaching moment. Two things happened. One, that was not good for the country. It put us down a line of dependency and so forth, and confusing the necessity of poverty alleviation with work schemes, and the historic achievement of Point Lisas. Because those are two factors that we live with. They're part of our character. It's in you, Ryan, it's in me. All of it as part of our makeup in Trinidad and Tobago. And we have to put effort into fortifying the one and quieting the other.
How do you assess the quality of our political leadership over the last 6 decades?
Well, it's been up and down, quite naturally, but we've had some great moments of building. And some of the best things that have happened, Ran, is that despite being a democracy with a two-party system and changing governments, we've had moments of quite incredible handing over of the baton. I think, for instance, Atlantic LNG was another great achievement. It was conceived when Patrick Manning was the Prime Minister. but the baton was flawlessly passed for execution during the subsequent Pandey regime. And all of that is to say, big economic moments have a long gestation. And we have at times, not always, but at times demonstrated the political maturity to mature those projects over different regimes. So that's a critical factor in assessing our political journey since independence.
Do you feel that political maturity is now fading?
I think that I wouldn't go so far as to say that. I think that why you even raise that question is because we are at another seminal moment. We are at a time where huge changes are required in our economic environment. And it's not yet clear that we will take the right steps to effect those changes. The jury is out. And as a Trinity to the bone, I have to remain very hopeful that we will do that.
Do you feel the Westminster system by which we adopted come independence helped this country in the way that we had hoped it would help?
Well, it's what we knew, and therefore, let's not knock it. But like any system, it needs change. I mean, for instance, the most successful system of transition in economics is the Chinese system. They have taken 900 million people out of poverty. But I wouldn't advocate us bringing the Chinese system here. The Chinese system is built on 2,000 years of operating a Mandarin, efficient, bureaucratic system that they have brought to the modern Chinese Communist Party. I don't know that we could successfully do that. So this system, the Westminster system, is what we know, but it needs tweaking right now. And I would say one of the greatest tweaks that is necessary right now is removal of this extreme centralization that we have, this top-down centralization. We have to go back into the communities and build our communities, especially, Ryan, because of what that weakness in our system is. If we workers feel that the economy is for the master and our job is to withhold, then that's bad. We have to feel part of the political system. We have to be part of the economic system. And we have to push governance down to the regional corporations and so forth, and communities in a much stronger fashion than we have operated in the past. I think the greatest expression of that failure is our cabinet system, where in any year, we consider 5,000 cabinet notes. The British, I think, is under 100, but we consider 5,000 cabinet notes a year, well over 100 at every cabinet meeting. And that's an extent of centralization that has not worked for us, and it cannot work for us. How can cabinet consider 8 to 100 notes over a weekend, from civil service leave to critical matters like Forex, all on one afternoon, one Thursday? So that, I think, is a criticism of our system, and it needs tweaking, not replacement.
You were a former finance minister. Trinbagonians often criticize the political leadership down the years for not investing properly in the country. Let's talk infrastructurally, for example. How we used the oil and gas money of the 80s and the 90s. What do you make of our economic evolution as an independent nation since the 60s?
Yes, we have used some of that money very wisely. And I go back to Point Lisa. Remember, that was all state-led. It started with the South Chamber, Bobby Montano, Sidney Knox, Krishna Narayan Singh. These were fabulously far-sighted people who started this, and eventually that chamber morphed into today's energy chamber. And they started the Point Research Project. And when it became too big for small private sector to handle, the government took it over, and Ken Julian took it over with substantial state investment that has paid handsome dividends for the country. So that was good investments. We've made some very good investments in roads. We're still spending money on that highway to Point Fortin. But we've made some very bad investments. I think of Petrotrin in particular. When I was a Minister of Finance, Petrotrin came with a project for refinery upgrade. And we borrowed $355 million from the IDB for that refinery upgrade. And that refinery took more than 8 years with cost overruns and this and that and the other, and eventually only came to completion when Mr. Pandey was in office. Then that's the late 1990s. Then in 2006, Petrotrin comes back with another project to go gas to liquids and borrowed 150 million US dollars to do this. And the project bankrupted in 2009. They didn't produce a teaspoon of liquids. And then next, in 2013, I think it was, they came with us $850 million project to strip out sulfur from their diesel production so that they could sell diesel up and down the islands. And that project went on and on and on. And Ryan, could you believe that they produced not a teaspoon of desulfurized diesel after the expenditure of $850 million US dollars? So ultimately, Petrotrin was closed, but Petrotrin closure wasn't an event. It was a process of misspent money, poor management, poor execution of capital projects, and so on and so forth. And ultimately, even though those loans weren't guaranteed by the government, they came back to haunt the government and fell to our fiscal situation. So those are examples of well-spent monies on roads, bridges, ports, industrial projects, and very, very bad monies spent on Petrotrin refinery. And there are others like it. Petrotrin was not unique, in which the trinity of laziness, idleness, and waste was dominant. We also spent a lot of money on social services. Every year, about $7 billion each on health and on education. We got benefit from it. We also spend a lot of money, Ryan, on subsidies. Subsidies for water, subsidies for electricity. I'm here in New York right now, and I look at my Con Ed bid, Ryan. It is 24 cents US per kilowatt hour. I also have my Tech bill that I just paid in Trinidad. It is 6 cents US per kilowatt hour. So that's a tremendous subsidy. And it's going to Tech. But not really to Tech. It's all of us who benefit from that. But ultimately, it has to be paid for by the exchequer. And it leads to a standard of living in Trinidad that is very, very high. We have a per capita income less than Barbados, but there was a recent study there in one of the newspapers by an economist called Bido, who looked at studies from the paper Economist that shows that because the cost of living is so much less in Trinidad because of a number of factors, but noticeably because of subsidies like TNTech and so forth, that make it a lot cheaper to live in Trinidad, so that even though we have a lower GDP per capita than Barbados, we enjoy a much higher standard of living than average Barbadians do. So all of that is to say that we have a good thing going for us in Trinidad, but we need to protect it. And we can't be wild and put it all at risk. And we are at such a seminal moment again where we have to make big changes and hope that the government is up to it. And we can't postpone it. The longer we postpone making these decisions, the worse for us.
What are some of those decisions? And maybe one of those decisions is ending the subsidies that we enjoy, or at least begin weaning off the subsidies we enjoy, moving away from oil and gas towards what the world now terms green hydrogen and these other forms of green energy. What are some of those decisions?
Well, let's start with the subsidy. We won't be weaned off them, but we need to reduce them. TNTech owes NGC, I think, is $2 billion for unpaid gas. The cheapest electricity in the world, I think, is in Nigeria. But when you turn on the lights, there's no light. We want to make sure that we don't petro-trim TNTech. So we have to increase the rates. Not to bring 6 cents up to 24 cents as in New York, but it can remain 6 cents. So those are signs of the things that we have to do. And then, yes, Ryan, we have a long history in oil and gas, and we need to try and keep that industry going for as long as we can, But we need right now to start doing the things to earn a living outside of that. Oil and gas is a big generator of our income. The energy sector accounts for 55% of our revenue. We're not going to replace that easily, but we have to start. And there are many things we could start. I see Haddad starting with ecotourism. That's something that I strongly advocate. I see a huge opportunity for us to take some of those same skills that we've developed in the oil and gas industry, engineering skills, and transfer it to this huge project, the Labre deepwater port and transshipment and repair facility, that dry dock facility. That is a huge investment, and it could transform all of Point Fortin and Labre and the Southern Peninsula in just the same way as Hoover and Chaguanas was transformed by Point Lisas. We need to look at that project very closely and find a Ken Julian with the full support of the government to execute that project. And Tobago, look at Tobago. I mean, they now have the best airport, I would say, in the Caribbean. They too need to get together with Tobagonians in the tourist industry, get together a Tobago Wall Sosa who has expertise in finance and knows the outside world. Pull in an Anjani Ganesh who loves Tobago and its marine resources, and find somebody from Barbados and Jamaica tourism and define the Tobago tourist project. And then when you have that defined, find another Ken Julian, local or international, to give him the keys and let him execute. Because Tobago has to understand that there is no real autonomy until they find a way to make themselves useful to the outside world. So that's what I would say. Those are some of the glimpses that I see of the future for Trinidad and Tobago. I'm quite confident that we found our way in the past. We successfully transitioned from oil to gas to petrochemicals to the point right now where pro-man operations employing trained Trinidad skilled labor are going to repair plants in Houston, Texas, and in pro-man plants in Mexico and so forth. That's the level of skill that Point Lisas has. And those skills could be translated into ship repair, ship docking, take methanol and use methanol to fuel ships, because Trinidad is at a crucial point to service ships coming out of the Panama Canal and going to South America, Brazil, Argentina, etc., etc. That's the gift of our location. We have the energy, we have the people, we just need, and that project has gone pretty far, we just need now to make sure that our execution is flawless under this present government.
Mr. Wendell Mottley, thank you for your service to our nation, and happy Independence Day.
Thank you, Ryan. And all of us are Trinity to the bone. All of us have to make sure that this thing works for our children and our grandchildren.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mottley.